Hello everyone, and welcome back to our channel.
I'm Jeremiah.
And I'm Daniela.
And this is JD Visual Magic.
Today, we're going to learn about the basics of photography for DSLR cameras.
Yes, set your DSLR cameras to manual mode. That's the little M on the top. Also, just a disclaimer, this video is mostly going to be using Canon cameras because that's what we use and we love Canon. Sponsor us.
There are three major factors involved determining how bright or how dark your pictures turn out.
Every DSLR camera has a sensor in it, and this sensor helps to expose the image.
Number one is aperture. That's the little ring inside your lens that opens and closes.
Aperture is one way to control how much light passes through your lens and onto your sensor. If the aperture number on your camera is really low, the aperture ring is going to be very wide open.
If the aperture number is really high on your camera, the aperture ring inside your lens is going to be really small.
The smaller that little ring is, the less light can be let through your camera and onto your sensor, thus resulting in a darker image. But in certain situations, like if you're outside in the sunlight, it's better to close that ring a little bit because you don't need all that extra light coming in and hitting your sensor. It's really up to you for preference, but just know, aperture is one of the ways to brighten or darken your image. Just a little note though, when the ring inside of your lens is open really wide, that is when the number on your aperture is really low at its lowest, that means that the background of your picture is going to be blurry. We call that bokeh, and it's really nice, really airy. People usually like that a lot. But if you have the aperture really high, that ring is really closed, and that means the whole picture is going to pretty much be in focus, meaning who's ever in the foreground and who's ever in the background, or what's ever in the background, is going to be fairly in focus with a very high aperture. So it just depends on your style.
The next thing is shutter speed. Shutter speed is a little mechanism that opens and closes to let light onto your sensor.
Now this mechanism opens and closes at different speeds depending on how high or low you set it. That's called the shutter speed. Similar to aperture, the lower the number on your shutter speed, the more time it's open, resulting in more light hitting your sensor. The faster it goes, the less light is able to hit the sensor because it opens and closes so fast it doesn't give it any time for light to hit the sensor.
A higher speed is good for action shots such as sports, photography, nature, wildlife movement, or jumping.
Just to know though, whenever you put that shutter speed really low, it's going to be harder to get moving shots. People are going to turn out blurry. If you ever wondered why your pictures turn out blurry before, it's because your shutter speed is way too low. You gotta boost that up somehow.
Next is ISO, or ISO. This is artificial light. We use this as a last resort.
ISO is the third and final way to lighten up your image for good reason. Nobody wants to use it because of the grain it adds. Now, what is grain? Some people call it grain, some people call it noise. It doesn't matter, but pretty much the higher the number goes on your ISO, the more noticeable grain you're gonna see in a picture. The lower the ISO is, the better, more clean and crisp it looks without so much of that noise. Since it is artificial light, it's giving you fake light, and it puts light in spots where it thinks it needs it. Sometimes it doesn't look very good. You might have little white dots, and you'll just see like that kind of staticky looking crap all in the background, and nobody likes it. Start with the aperture, always try to bring the aperture to let in the most light. Then use your shutter speed to go as low as you can to let in more light, but then if it just isn't enough, then go for the ISO.
Pro tip, make sure you put your white balance to auto.
Yes, when you put your white balance to auto, it kind of just makes the colors that you see in real life show up on your image. So there's no difference in the way that a skin tone looks or something looks. It's on your camera, normally in your menu settings, or if you have a more expensive camera, it's on the top little row. You can press your white balance. Just set it to AWB or auto white balance. We'll go over white balance more in a future video because there's so much fun stuff you can do with it. In order to take better pictures, you gotta know these three things. You gotta know the aperture, you gotta know the shutter speed, you gotta know the ISO. It's really gonna help you in the long run.
Thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you next week on our next tutorial.
Yep. Peace out, people.